This is Retail Voices, the podcast where leaders from the world of retail and outside of retail talk straight about what really works. Insight, innovation, and the human side of the industry all in one place. Hosted by Mark Lack. That's me. Let's dive in. Hi, Andy, and welcome to Retail Voices.
Thanks so much for having me.
No, it's great for you to be here, especially as it's sleeting now, yeah?
Yeah.
Today we're talking about something that sits right at the heart of retail transformation, the intersection of human behaviour, AI and transparency in how shoppers make decisions. We're joined by Andy Ellwood, founder and CEO of Stretch, a new platform aimed at making grocery shopping smarter, fairer and more transparent for everyday families. Andy's career is extraordinary and eclectic. He grew up in Texas, launched his first business at 12, sold private jets for Warren Buffett, led startups that were acquired by Facebook and Google, and co-founded Basket, one of the first grocery tech companies putting price transparency into consumers' hands. His journey also includes reinvention after the tragic loss of his main investor, a moment that shifted him into executive coaching before returning to his original mission, closing the gap between retailers and consumers using real data and real insight. And this year, Andy raised another $1.5 million to launch Stretch, bringing AI-powered collective shopper insight into grocery shopping in a practical, accessible way. Andy, it's really good to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was a great intro. You captured a lot of the threads we might pull on today.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I've got a lot of threads to pull on you today, so be ready. So, I mean, if we look at your origin story, it has been an unusual career path. Your journey has covered everything from aviation to Silicon Valley to grocery tech. Talking about threads, what is the common thread that has always pulled you towards fixing broken systems?
I forget who said it, but there's a saying that says the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed. And I think that's something that I've thought a lot about. I'm very grateful for the community that I grew up in, but it was pretty sheltered. It was, everybody kind of agreed with each other. Everyone was kind of like talking their own book. What that person thought was also what that person thought, and a lot of things had never made their way to me. Like I spent most of my freshman year in college watching Adam Sandler movies because I didn't get most of the jokes that my friends were telling me. And I realized, they're all lines from Adam Sandler movies in the 90s. and so being not having as much access, I think, was something that I realized later that was an opportunity that the internet and technology at large has really changed the fact that most people have access to most technology and most innovation if they're exposed to it and they know to go look for it. And I think that's something that I just keep coming back to in thinking about if there's a solution to a problem that more than a few people have, how do you put that solution out to a much larger audience and let them know that there's actually things that have been done to take away that pain point. And so I think that's a thought that I think a lot about is collective knowledge. Right, that if I know that something and you know something, we combine what we know, there's probably actually some insights in what we both put together. But now do that across millions of people, right? So when I worked at Waze, we took millions of drivers on the road and we did our best to help solve traffic. And so that's kind of where a little bit of my obsession has been is the community building and collective knowledge paired with technology.
Well, that's fantastic because that's part of the reason why I started up Retail 101 online. I'm going through an age-related process at the moment, as we all do. And at some stage I will retire. My wife said to me once, it's a shame when people retire because all of that knowledge they have, all of that information they have disappears. It doesn't go anywhere. So she suggested I start up or try and write a book first, but then I went to start up a podcast and the video on YouTube as well. And it's a way of getting at least my knowledge out into as many people as possible. So I understand the sort of community vibe behind what you're doing. if we look at Basket in particular and the story behind Basket, what did you learn building Basket that still guides your thinking today in terms of data, retailer collaboration, and consumer behavior?
Building Basket was pretty lonely
Okay.
because we were really some of the only folks building shopper first.
Mm.
So in the world of retail, there are entrenched players that like things the way that they are. And if I was one of those entrenched players, I would be doing exactly what they're doing. Defend the status quo as much as I possibly can. And there hasn't truly been a true order of magnitude change in the way a lot of retail operates, right? Even e-commerce is, retailer controlled. Here's what you can buy on our terms, and here's how we will send it to you and share it with you. And I think that shoppers are starting to wake up to the fact that they have more power and more access to information than they thought they did. And Basket was early in that journey. We started it in 2013, and it was, the smartphones were still just kind of coming online. Apps were just kind of coming online. We still had to tell people they had to turn on location services on their phone in order for the app to work. And, just those early things that we now just take for granted, 13, 14 years later. And so I think that being early is a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes you're just too early. Right? You might be right, but you might be early. And I think that's something that, when I look back on the experience at Basket, learned a lot, and failed forward
Yeah.
in some of the things that we did, but also kind of held on to the kernels of ideas that worked and things that didn't work, and I'm really grateful to have been able to take some of those lessons and apply it to what we're building now.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, we built our customer engagement app, basically a loyalty app, but sold as a customer experience and a customer assistant app. And we started that in the Middle East in 2015, 2016.
Yeah.
And, everybody had the loyalty cards, as you do back then, and you stuff them into your wallet, and your wallet ends up, this thick because you've got all these cards in it. And we were at a strategy session, and my then commercial director for the group, he had started talking about loyalty quite a lot. And he was the one who suggested we don't have a card, we do it via an app, which again was pretty much unheard of at the time.
Sure.
And we'd been discussing with a few different people about how to do this. And we'd discussed with one of the biggest providers in the region for this type of thing. And when we had the first meeting with them, they actually said it can't be done, which is, red flag to a bull. Of course it can be done. And then we had a very interesting discussion with one of the biggest data people at the time. They spun out of still recognized as one of the early adopters of customer loyalty in the UK, one of the biggest retailers in the UK. And we spoke to their loyalty data people, and they also said what we're suggesting cannot be done. So we built it ourselves.
Yeah.
Because it was too early. But what we did to sort of protect us a little bit is, because once we knew the app was going to go out, we thought our competitors will follow us fairly quickly, because you can create an app relatively, and now you can create it on AI, but even then you could create it fairly quickly and just copy paste everything that's there. So what we had a very extensive phased rollout plan. So what they saw at first was just literally phase one. We were ready for when they launched theirs to have phase 2, phase 3, phase 9, phase 15, adding all of these extra bits on it, because we'd also had some really interesting discussions with customers about what they wanted in the app, because truly the app was for them. What we wanted was the data. We wanted the information. So we had to make sure all those benefits were for them. And it's sort of similar to what you're saying there is, what do we do with the consumer? Because actually it's the consumer using it. And getting somebody to turn on location-based services back then when people thought, oh, you're tracking me, you're doing this. And of
Yeah.
course,
Yep.
now apps themselves have to say, can the app track you across different things? And no, is what I say most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because why should it? But I mean, you talk a lot about grounding AI also in reality.
Yeah.
How do you balance the promise of AI? Because people promise so much with AI at the moment, and I've sat in multiple meetings with people talking about AI. How do you balance the promise of it with the messy, emotional, very human way that people actually shop for groceries?
Yeah. I think that when I think about AI and where it is today in 2026 and where it's going, we're we're just getting started, right? And the infrastructure is what's really noisy right now. All the big models are raising billions of dollars at $1 trillion valuations. But when you think about what's their defensibility, right? Their defensibility is, they trained a model on, what's available on the internet, right?
Yeah,
And that is going to be commoditized at some point in the future, right? There's going to be a plateau of information that it can consume. And so I think what gets me excited is thinking about AI as a tool that turns everyday people into superheroes
mm,
for themselves, right? That learning how to structure information, learning how to structure data, learning how to ask the right questions or give the right prompts is already happening. And there's some basic use cases, but most people, if we're being super honest, use AI like Google Plus, right? It's like Google a little bit better than Google, right? They're asking it a question or they're asking it to take my picture and make me look like an astronaut. And that's kind of the extent of the people who have used AI. And only about 10% of the world have actually used AI at this point,
mm,
right? So there's still another, 7 billion people that are not using AI. And of the people who have used AI, there's only 10% of them have ever paid for a service, have ever seen it run up, and of them, only 10% of them have ever seen it run a complicated workflow and seen output on the other side. And so for me, when I think about the way that I use AI, and I have a pretty full stack, that I use across personal and professional reasons, the amount of time that it frees up for me in a given day
mm,
is pretty incredible. And it's giving me space to think about some of the bigger challenges and, use my agents and use the AI that I have that I've built and trained to help me solve some of the challenges and problems of taking on this big swing that we're building with Stretch. And I think that when people start to realize how many things it could free up in their space and time, it's not going to be, oh, is it AI? It's just that's technology, right?
yeah,
We don't
yeah,
talk about the fact that oh yeah, that's a cloud-based computing system. It's just technology, right?
yeah,
We don't
yeah.
talk about Excel and the macros that run in the background when you're doing your budget for the year. That's just technology. And I think eventually AI kind of fades into the background as the technology that we expect. But the packaging and the way in which we put it forward needs to be much more explicit around if you ask this, if you are looking for this, if you are desiring this outcome, here's the way in which that can happen. And I think that we're going to see a lot of innovation, the rest of this year and in 2027 around really kind of having that breakout moment for where it's not just, innovators and people who love to tinker, but
Mm.
it really kind of becoming something that people use without even really realizing that they're using it. And I think that that's one of the things that we think about a lot with Stretch is I'm trying to feed my family. I'm not trying to become really good at AI. But if AI helps me feed my family, then I'm very okay with using AI to save time, save money, and to have something that is smarter than me, that works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, doesn't need vacations, and doesn't sleep. And if that's available to help me save money and save time when I'm feeding my family, I think that there's a lot of people that will be pretty interested in that.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, again, for years we've spoken about personalization for
Yeah.
retailers, and this is why we want your data, we want your information, so that we can personalize. Now, in the past, when you just look at the amount of data that we would get from a loyalty program, it was difficult to actually pull out any good information from it because the systems weren't designed for it.
Yeah.
And we could use very small examples. So, as an example, we used to look at certain key products for consumption habits. And we could tell the 50 gram of Nescafe Red Mug coffee, we could work out the consumption habit and how often somebody would buy it. Therefore, we could actually personalize by sending them a message to say, you might be about to run out of Nescafe Red Mug. So, therefore, now is the time to buy some more. And that was good, but it wasn't as good as it could have been. And even myself, I've spoken about this a couple of times now. On if you look at Amazon and the amount of information that Amazon has on everybody right now, across viewing and across shopping and across multiple other things that they have on us. When I started a couple of years ago doing this and doing Retail 101 online, I had to purchase some equipment. And one of the items I wanted to purchase was, my microphone, because that was important. And I purchased a good one. Now, within 5 or 6 days, one of the first messages I got from Amazon after purchasing my microphone was, would you like to buy a microphone?
Yeah.
Well, that puts me off you, Amazon, because I've already purchased a microphone. I don't need another microphone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we haven't been able to personalize yet.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that the calling that personalization is just wrong, right? That's not personalization. That's sell you more stuff.
Yes.
And as I said, I understand why the retailers are doing that, because that's what their directive is, right? But when it's all said and done, that's not personalization. That's just figuring out how to sell you more stuff. It's not giving you better options. It's not exposing you to things that are potentially better for you or healthier for you, or it's just trying to figure out what's the least amount of work we can do to potentially increase the bottom line this week. And I think that that's what the promise of AI and especially agentic commerce, I think, eventually leads to. But the thing that I think is really important to think about is that when you think about agents and when you think about AI, whoever wrote the prompt is who that AI serves. And so as exciting as it is to have Amazon and Target and Walmart and Instacart launching agents, those agents exist for one purpose and one purpose only: increase the bottom line for the retailer.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Sparky, Walmart's agent, they, on their earnings report last week, they said about 50% of the people that shopped on Walmart.com had used Sparky in some way, shape, or form. Which is pretty impressive. That's a huge amount of penetration. Of those that completed a purchase, 33% larger basket size.
Wow.
Now, if you're a retailer or if you're a Walmart shareholder, that's really exciting news. Walmart found a new way to get more out of their shoppers, to extract more from each shopping trip. Congratulations, Walmart. That's awesome. If I'm a shopper, that means Walmart just figured out a way to make me spend 33% more than what I was planning to. And I want to see a future where the shopper has an agent that talks to Walmart's agent and says, this is what I'm going to spend, and this is what I need this week. What can you do for me? And so I think demand side agents, DSAs, I think will become a thing where the Ellwood family will say, this is my grocery list for the week. These are the things that I'm thinking about purchasing for the week. And I would like my agent to go out and look at what my options are, to bring me back that information and say, this week, based on distance of store, based on price, based on loyalty, based on coupons, discounts, promos, based on a special gift from this retailer because they want to win your basket, here's what I was able to do for you. That's a future that's really exciting for shoppers, but I also think probably not that exciting for retailers that are not ready for that type of future. But I think that future is not that far away. And I think that demand side agents are potentially going to be a very disruptive future that is in the works. And before we know it, that'll be the expectation of the shopper, right? It won't be the super savvy, crazy coupon flipper who spends all of Saturday morning downloading 7 apps, rebuilding their shopping list in an Excel spreadsheet, and going to one store for these 3 things and 5 stores for those 4 things. It'll just be information that's all in one place. The information exists. It's all structured. It's all there on a localized level, a zip code level, pricing level, loyalty level, but it's not very well organized to be shopper first. And so that's something that I get really excited about.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting as well, because we as retailers have been using our own sort of demand-based purchasing for years, because if I was with another big retailer, and when we were looking at canned tuna, we were running reverse auctions in terms of not only the tuna itself, but also the packaging, the whether it be the paper all around the tin itself, and then the actual packaging of the product. And we would have 7 or 8 different suppliers, and they would come on and, okay, let's see where you can get down to on each of these different elements. So I think, in a way, as a retailer, we've used it before ourselves. And that's just us with maybe 7 or 8 or 10 different suppliers on one very specific item. It will be very interesting once we've got millions of customers coming to us and saying, okay, this is what we want to buy from somebody. What have you got? And what can you do with this? And I think that will then become very, very interesting, from the consumer perspective. Because then finally, and I think you mentioned this earlier, finally the consumer takes back the power that the consumer is supposed to have, but because each consumer is only an individual, they have 0 power technically. But by having this sort of system start up, then what you've got the consumer does take back the power. And we used to do this years ago with e-commerce, where we would scrape our competitors' websites to find out their pricing and stuff like that. So when you're able to do that, that's fine. But with this new system, it's just going to make it more complicated. But of course, there will always be somebody else who will come along and sell us another solution to work it out for us as retailers.
Yeah, but I think that in some ways it really can align incentives. That right now, if you got a notification from your distribution center that a whole new pallet of things were coming and they were going to be delivered in 2 days, and you knew you had to make room for them on the shelves because the products that you have on the shelves now are expiring or are getting close to. What are you going to do? You're going to put it at the front of the store and hope that people want to buy it, and and then you're going to throw it away, right? It's $100 billion a year in the U.S. in food waste just from the grocery industry, right? Well, what if you had demand captured from what shoppers were looking for, and you knew that there were 1,200 families within a 5-mile radius of your store that had that product on this week's shopping list?
Yeah.
Like what type of coordination could you provide them to not just hope that they came into the store and saw it up at the front on sale or on discount, but you actually were able to put a push notification out saying, hey, 50% off this product. We have a new shipment coming in, and we know that you're thinking about buying it in the coming week, right? That type of coordination, and to your point, almost real-time bidding on baskets. Hey, here's we carry all the things on your basket, and you have these 3 things that we're trying to move this week. We're going to give you 50% off, deep discounts on those 3 things because we're going to write them off anyway.
Yes.
And we're going to win the rest of your basket. Like that type of intelligence and that type of coordination between demand and supply has never existed before. And in something as complex as grocery, as habitual as grocery, I think it's a really exciting future.
Oh, it is. I mean, we have some apps that are in the UK, and there were a couple of startups in the GCC which were looking at how we reduce waste by putting them onto the app and then telling customers on the app that, okay, we have 3 bread rolls that are going to go out of date today. They're currently 50% off. And I think those worked to an extent that you could reduce your wastage. The problem is again, it's relying on people having to go to the shop right now to pick up that bag of close to expiry goods,
Yeah.
and then using them. But I think this ability to then look at, okay, I've got 1,200 customers, 500 customers, 100 customers. How can I access them to say, I have what you need, and this
Yep.
is the price I'm prepared to give it to you at, and
Yeah.
that would be amazing. I mean, we've tried lots of different things, from customer specific pricing, which is always difficult because, as I said earlier, this customer that is buying Nescafe Red Mug 50 gram, and I know he buys one every 10 days. Do I need to send him an offer when I know or do I just need to remind him that he's going to run out?
Right.
And that's always, again, the dichotomy there is
Yeah.
I know he's about to run out, so he needs to make a purchase. But if he comes to me anyway regularly for it, do I need to send him an offer or just a reminder? So it's a real balance, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's one thing with Stretch. We are retailer agnostic, right? We just want to give our shoppers the information that they need, and then we understand what decision they ended up making, right? But I think that's in the large retailers in the U.S. that we've spoken with, who we're all 3 months post launch, we're a baby company, but we already have two of the largest grocery stores in the country that have reached out to us and said, look, we see what you're doing, because if we are able to actually capture that pre-purchase intent that's sitting on a grocery list, that's never been captured before outside of a retailer app, right? To capture retailer agnostic pre-purchase intent is the holy grail in retail, especially in grocery, because grocery, 90% of people shop with a grocery list of some kind, right? 20 billion trips to the grocery store in the US, 90%, that's 18 billion grocery lists that get thrown away after you walk out of the store, or deleted off your phone, or refreshed in a text from your spouse. That is so much information that shoppers are throwing away and retailers have never seen. And I think that the truth of what I intended to purchase and what I did purchase is never been understood, right? The $10 billion grocery data industry is all post-purchase information.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
If I go to the grocery store on my way home tonight, and my wife, sent me the 18 things that I need to pick up, and I walk out of the grocery store with 12 things, that grocery store is like, yes, 12 items were purchased. They don't know that I didn't buy 6 things, and that I'm going to stop at another store on my way home because either the price was too high, it was out of stock, or the quality wasn't that great. Those 6 things are being purchased somewhere else, and the retailer has no idea. And so understanding what that intent was, and then understanding what that action is, that the delta there is pretty powerful.
Well, that was something we had inside the Happy Me app, was the customer shopping list. And it was actually built for customers to make their shopping list first. As they built up receipts, they could actually look at their previous receipts and add it to the shopping list.
Mm-hmm.
And then as they went around the store, the shopping list was dynamic. So once you said, okay, I've got that, it moved down and the next ones came up. So you could see 5 or 6 items on the list.
Yeah.
There were other additions in phase 4 and phase 6 and phase 10 of launch, which included, for men especially, the quickest way around the store based upon your shopping list. So you can find everything and pick it all up.
Yeah.
There was we can build your shopping list for you based upon your history. And then also, because the app itself allowed you to have family groups, you could add different families to the list. And obviously in the Middle East, there's a lot of drivers and maids and et cetera, and home help. So you can actually have sort of mum, dad, the maid, and one of the kids on the same family group. And if the maid went to do the shopping, you could actually add things to the shopping list dynamically while she was going around doing the shopping for you. We didn't start to use that data because, again, the systems were just not able to correlate. Okay, this customer, when they walked into the store, had this many items on the shopping list, but they only purchased X number. So what happened? Were we out of stock? So we can go and check it. Now we could start to do that sort of thing, but we couldn't back then.
Yeah. And I think that's just the evolution of technology, especially in grocery retail, is just so interesting, right? It was the last to have e-commerce really catch a foothold,
Yes.
but I truly do think that it'll be the first for agentic commerce to catch a foothold,
Yes.
for the inverse reasons of e-commerce, right? E-commerce caught hold, in the late 90s and early 2000s because it was things that you couldn't buy locally,
Yeah.
right? That those amazing headphones from Japan, that dress from Paris, the cool sneakers from New York City that were not in your town. Like you could get anything from anywhere sent to you. But it was like it had taste. It was unique. It was like
Yes.
something special. Grocery is like habitual and like pretty low emotion, but it's complex. It's the only major commerce area that is multiple items every time you go to the store,
Yes.
right? Like,
And
like,
from
like
different categories.
yeah, and from different categories, exactly. And so those are all the things that AI and agents love: complexity, habitualness, and low emotions. Right? You don't.
Yes.
The agent doesn't have to know, will this match my living room, or does it look good with what else is in my wardrobe? Right? It doesn't have to know what size shoe I wear, in order to buy me the milk. I need milk, eggs, cheese, and bread every week. Like who's got the best this week? And I think that's where I think grocery has a real opportunity to be a very, very innovative first mover in the
Yes.
agentic commerce space.
Well, I think the other thing, part of the reason why e-commerce took a while in retail grocery in particular, is because we were of a mind that people wouldn't buy fresh products online because people like to see it, feel it, touch it, smell it, actually see what's going on. And fruit and veg in particular was one of the areas where we thought people are not going to have someone else pick their fruits and veg for them. However, fruit and veg can be 20-25% of a basket in e-commerce in the Middle
Yeah,
East, in the
yeah,
businesses I've worked in. So people are actually okay with you picking their fruit and veg for them,
yeah, yeah.
which is
No, I think
crazy.
I mean, I can imagine a future grocery store that is mostly experiential up front and
Mm.
distribution center in the back. And experiential up front, is the current outer aisle items, right? The meat and seafood, the produce,
Yep.
the
Yep.
dairy, right? Those are all things that if people choose to go into stores, that's what they want to go into the store and actually like see, touch, feel, right? They want to touch the avocados, they want to see the bananas, they want to look at the marbling on the steak, make sure it's what they're like. I want that steak, not that steak, right? They don't really want to walk through the inner aisles and like grab a box of cornflakes and grab a can of tomato soup.
Bin of beans.
I don't
Yeah. Yeah.
care. I don't
Yeah.
care which box of cornflakes you grab. Just grab the box of cornflakes, and especially frozen foods. Like I don't want to spend any time in the frozen food section, right? All of that, I think that there's a future where it's mostly distribution center things on the back,
Mm.
and the autonomous picking systems and the robots that are on their way. They'll be able to do most of that, and you walk up, do your tour through the meat and seafood, dairy, produce, and by the time you get up to the front, there's a box waiting for you with your bags, boxes, and cans, former inner aisle things. You check out and you head home. Because
That'd be a
there are still people who really do like enjoy still going to a store for
yes.
some things, right? And there's a lot of other people who are like, no, everybody just deliver all of it. I don't care, So I think that it's going to be an interesting future to see, kind of the way it continues to bifurcate by, quality of food, by, socioeconomics, by tradition.
Mhm.
So I think it's going to be a pretty disruptive decade in the retail space, to say the least.
Oh, absolutely. I think the next 5 years or the next 2 to 5 years are going to be really interesting. Um, so let's just go into the past a little bit. And you've spoken openly about the moment your main investor was lost in a plane crash, and how that changed everything. How did you navigate that period, both personally, because that must have been, absolutely, I can't even imagine it, but also professionally?
Yeah, I think that hard times reveal character.
Hmm.
And in hindsight, there are things that I wish I would have done differently, but it was just such a crazy, set of emotions, and
Mm.
that experience just kind of just caught us off guard. But we had probably put a little bit too much faith. We put too many of our eggs into one basket. And we had not been, in hindsight, we had not been uh, as open with the marketplace, as open with other investors as we probably should have been, just to make sure that, like, if we said this is going to work, and we kind of just said that's the thing that's going to work. And I think that I joke all the time, that the CEO only has two jobs: set the vision and don't run out of money, right? And we'd set the vision, but when our main funder died 3 days before he was supposed to send his next $5 million check that we needed next month to make payroll, that ultimately tragedies happen, but ultimately that falls on the leaders, and so we scrambled and we did what we had to do to keep the company going. But man, it was wild. And just seeing the reaction from team members, who we said, hey, we might be a couple days late on payroll, and a couple of them quit same day. They're just like, well, all right, then I'm out. And we're like, hey, it's a startup. Nothing's guaranteed. And you kind of see character show up in different ways. We called it our other investors, and we said, hey, this is what happened, and they said, well, good luck. And characters revealed in different ways when hard things happen, and you really see who believed and who was just taking a flyer. I joke that sometimes VC is supposed to stand for venture capital, but sometimes it has felt like it stands for very certain, right? Like no offense to my friends who are venture capitalists, but sometimes you're like there's no guarantee that this is going to work. That's the point. Like, we're venturing to try and build something that's never been built before in the history of the world. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I think that when I look back on that time, I didn't really sleep, for 2019. I was on planes, and I was flying from New York to San Francisco for the day. I take the 6 a.m. flight out and take the 4 p.m. flight back. Just to do one meeting. Just to shake the hand, be in the same room as an investor, and it took me a while to recover from that, truthfully. Because I was almost 8 years in to building the company, and so to see all of it kind of crumble in front of us was a real challenge. And but you never expect your investor is going to die in a plane crash on his birthday, and
No.
But we learned a lot, and fortunately we lived to fight another day.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something you could build into any strategic planning document, or even a business continuity plan. I mean, it's slightly different, but also the character that we saw in the retail industry, especially the grocery industry, once the pandemic started and the lockdown started. You saw a lot of character in people there as well, and we had to get our business continuity plan up and running pretty quickly. But no, I mean, I still don't know what I would have done. I mean, I've worked with different ways of organizing capital, but I have no idea how I would have managed that. It's just completely, out of my wheelhouse. So, obviously, I'm sorry for his loss and your loss. But it's good that you've sort of come through that. It's inspirational.
I think the crazy part was, we survived 2019, right? He passed away, early January of 2019, and we survived 2019, and then at the holiday party in 2019, we're like, all right, guys, that was a tough year, but like at least we've got 2020 to look forward to, and then the pandemic hit 3 months later, so. It was a lot of things that we just like you said, you could never have war gamed that out.
No.
And you roll with punches, and sometimes you win, and sometimes you lose. But it's I think it's important to to take a breath.
Yes.
And be able to look back and say, that's that's what I learned, and this is how I'm going to put it into anything that I do in the future.
I still love the SSDD moniker for same shit, different day. Sometimes it happens. So obviously after that you went into coaching executives for several years. What brought you back into grocery? And I mean, we talked about it earlier in terms of community thing. Why did you feel compelled to solve this issue with stretch?
Executive coaching was a gift as a landing place, after 12 years of building companies, and then, 3 of them worked, and then the 4th one, unfortunately, did not. And it kept me close to the crazies, right? Executive coaching, kept me close to people that were trying to put their dent in the world. And just kind of reminded me of what the early days were like, and but I had the privilege of coaching publicly traded executives and investors and celebrities and authors, and as well as startup founders and startup executives, and it kept me close to the problems that were happening, but it allowed me to take a breath on the weekend, and that's something I had not really had time to do in the first 40 years of my career. I just, pedal to the metal nonstop. I sold a company, and I started a new company on Monday. It was, I never really took a break. And so, in those 4 years that I was coaching, and advising, I found time to get married. I found time to become a dad. Things that like I'm so grateful for, right?
Yeah.
But the, and so I always knew that there was a chance that I would go back and try and build something again. But I was very, very grateful that I worked with my executive coach to come up with my non-negotiables for the circumstances that would have to be true for me to ever become a founder again. Because being a founder is crazy, and no one should ever do it. Like, it's not, it's a horrible decision. You should not ever become a founder. I used to tell people that they should become founders. I retract all of those statements. You have to be absolutely insane to be a founder. But if you are insane, you should absolutely be a founder. Like, you should go for it. Because if there's a problem in the world that has driven you to the point of insanity, where you say, I'm the one who can fix this, that's what you have to have in order to become a founder. Right? You should not want to become a founder to make money. You should not want to become a founder to have a cool job title. It is too hard, and it is not that fun, and you don't make that much money most of the time.
Yes.
But if there's a problem that you've fallen in love with, and the problem, not the solution, and this is another big problem that I saw people, I see a lot of people do, is they've created a solution that they then go try and find a problem that it fits.
Yep.
And they're in love with the solution, not the problem that it fixes. So fall in love with a problem, fall in love with a thing that you want to see eradicated from this world, and say, I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure that goes away. And I call it a 10-year problem, right? I said that I would never become a founder again unless I thought it was a problem that would take more than 10 years to solve. And I don't know what the final solution is, right? That, like, I know what the first couple of years might look like, what early solutions could be, but when it's all said and done, to truly solve the problem, like, we're gonna have to build things that no one's ever built before. And so during those 4 years of being a coach, I looked at a lot of different problems that were interesting, and I just wasn't confident that I could fully fall in love with those problems as a 10-year problem, right? A problem that I thought would take 10 years to solve. I ended up investing in someone's company. Like, a very good friend of mine wanted to create a health and wellness app for people who play pickleball. And that's cool. But I hate pickleball. And when he kind of deviated and moved, towards the pickleball app, I was like, I don't know. Like, that's not, I'm glad I invested in the, and I wish the company well, but, like, when it's all said and done, like, I don't like pickleball. And so I'm not going to be excited about that company as something for me. I was really grateful to invest in some climate companies, in some that have done some really cool things, including one that we just partnered with Richard Branson and the British Virgin Islands, which is really fun. So we got to meet him on his island, a couple times over the past few years. Wow. But when the opportunity to re-engage with the problem that I started trying to solve in 2013, right? I'd already been working on it for 10 years. I'd already been thinking about the solutions for it for 10 years. And when my partner in the business, who was working in the grocery industry, he was coming at it from a different angle. He reached out to me cold on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, I've been thinking about solving this problem of pricing visibility for groceries. Can we kind of pick your brain? I saw what you do with Basket, and I'd love to chat with you about it." And so he works in the grocery industry, and he was thinking about it, and seeing what was happening with AI and the way that world was working. And he's like, I see what it's doing for retailers. Imagine what it could do for shoppers. And I said, I have imagined that. I think that's great. Let me invest in your company. And he goes, no. Let's build it together. And so that's what got us back in. Was the opportunity is still there. The opportunity was better because of AI and the way that prices and inventory are now cataloged down to a local level, and the opportunity to build with somebody who comes from the industry and saw it as a different point of view, has been just those three things all coming together, and the chance to solve a 10-year problem. That's what got me back in. That's what got me back on the seat.
Fantastic. That's a great story. I mean, it's, the bit that resonated with me was this solution and then the problem, rather than the other way around. And I've had lots of CTOs and CMOs and CXOs in meetings presenting me what they need money for this month. And most of them have been because it's a shiny new toy, rather than actually it's going to either make more money, it's good for the consumer, it's good for operations, it's good for the business from that perspective. And what you end up finding is that a lot of companies end up spending a lot more money than they should, because it's whichever CXO is shouting loudest at a particular time, and saying, I need this because it will give us X, Y, Z, because we're chasing the revenue stream, we're chasing the profitability, rather than actually saying, okay, this is going to help the consumer in this way or that way. And we know that grocery is an absolute battleground of price and loyalty and convenience and trust, all of these things that we speak about. But what do you think retailers still misunderstand about how the modern shopper makes decisions, and especially more so after the pandemic when we had all these lockdowns and everything else?
Yeah, I think that as more and more information is available to shoppers, they're realizing more and more the walled gardens that they've been kept inside of. The walls are not that tall.
Mm. Yeah.
And that they do have more choice than they think that they do. And that, even just the investigative journalist report that came out from Consumer Reports in November about how Instacart was fixing prices, and different people were paying different prices for different products based on their browser history. And the extractive nature of some retailers is starting to be more well known. And so it's not just your local friendly, manager of the store who's like, oh, good to see you again, Mark. But there's a big corporation who has a bottom line that they're trying to hit, and you are what stands between them and this quarter's numbers. They're going to make their numbers. And I think that the more that shoppers understand that they have more choices than they think they do, and that the information is out there for them to actually be able to have a full picture of the choices that they can make. And I think the important thing, that we're learning with Stretch, and that I think will continue to come to light, is it's not always about price, right? Sometimes it's about time. Sometimes it's about convenience, right? And just knowing that there's a store that's closer by that carries the 5 things you need for dinner tonight. When you've got 3 kids in the back of your car, you don't care how much it costs.
Yes.
Right. You'll spend an extra $3, $5 on 5 things if it's the store that's closest and has a well-lit parking lot, and you can run in and run out and know that those things are in stock. But man, if you've got 3 kids in the backseat of your car and you go into the store and they don't have 2 of the 5 things that you're looking for, and then you got to go to another store, like you got to park again, you got to get the kids out of the car again, that's a challenge that I think that
I think
is available there.
Absolutely where AI will come in, because a lot of times as retailers we don't understand the context behind the purchase. Why are you coming to me? Is it because you've got 3 kids in the back and I've got all 5 items that you need? But absolutely, what you've done is you've happened to see that from my e-commerce app that I have them in stock, or you see it from somewhere that I've got them in stock. That we still don't understand the context yet of why you're currently shopping with me. I know when I'm a I mean, in the Middle East, some of our stores were community-based stores. So we were the only retailer, grocery retailer, on a community of 1,000 villas. So, 99% of the time I knew why they shopped with me,
Sure.
because I was convenient and there was nobody else around. And it would be
Yeah.
another 20-minute drive in a car to come to me. Now, even with that context, we still tried to make sure that we were well priced, we weren't overpriced, we had good availability, we
Yeah.
had the right assortment in there for them, because we felt, and this is what I tried to develop all the time, was that we were part of the community. Not
Yeah.
just a retailer selling products, but we were a
Yep.
community store. And in fact, even myself, as we started building the business, because this was a build from zero, I actually joined every single Facebook community page where that community was based, myself as the CEO. And then I brought in the store manager to also be part of that Facebook community group, so that there was some direct discussion. So if a customer had happened to walk into our store and we were out of stock of something and they made a complaint on the Facebook page, we could respond immediately and instantly. And in fact, what we started doing then, just for badness, a bit of ambush marketing here, is we started joining community groups where we were not the store. One of our competitors was. And when a customer complained about the fact that something was out of stock, so there was a particular customer I remember, and the local retailer in that community was out of stock of the baby size of Pampers, the early baby sizes, 0 to 3 months. So I quickly sent him a message when it popped up, and I said, well, if you can give me half an hour, I can deliver some to you, because we're in the community next door. But it'll take me about half an hour. And he was amazed that we did this.
That's incredible.
So it was a bit of ambush marketing, but it worked.
Yeah.
Because
100%.
People end up trusting you.
And that is still the opportunity, right? There's still the opportunity to bring the human element back in. Going back to what we talked about earlier, with AI, we should all find more time to be able to be more human.
Yes.
Right? That is what I think, a future of AI should be.
Yeah.
I worry very much that that's not what it will be, but I think that is what the promise of AI is. That there are certain things that are only human, and being able to shake a hand and being able to sit with somebody, be able to have a cup of coffee and not feel rushed. Like those are all things that if your AI is doing the work that you asked it to do and it says it'll be done in 30 minutes, great, go get a cup of coffee with a person on your team and talk about like the future, talk about what else we could do, talk about human things, like don't talk about work, and I think that's a fun future to imagine. I worry that that's not actually what will happen. We'll just find a new level of productivity. But it's what I hope for myself and for my family at least.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know from personal experience that I have found a new level of productivity, because I have 3 or 4 other YouTube channels that I have developed over the last 4 or 5 months, that are doing quite well right now. And a lot of it is done with a huge amount of assistance from AI, so that's very helpful. And again, the interesting thing comes down to the data. So, you've seen firsthand the sort of level of data that retailers have. Now, a lot of it is not always clean data, because we have very strange ways of categorizing things and putting things into different baskets and tables and all this kind of stuff. So it doesn't always match real shopping behaviors. Why is this disconnect so dangerous, and how does Stretch help fix this?
Yeah, that was the biggest data lift to get off the ground, was building our master catalog in a retailer agnostic way. So we have over 550,000 products in our database, and we have mapped their relationship to each other. So regional brands, store brands, national brands, different sizes, different different semantics in the way that they're described, different words used by some retailers versus others. Some of it's in the title of the product. Other times it's in the description of the product.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's on unit count. Sometimes it's on weight. all of those things, that was a huge part of the data lift,
Yeah.
so that we can do the very simple thing of comparing, a shopping list at one store to a shopping list in another store.
Well, I mean,
And
just to jump in there,
yeah,
just to give an example of that, I worked for a retailer again in the Middle East, and I usually take out one specific category, which is tomato ketchup, as a subcategory within condiments, within grocery. And I usually look at that one, but in this particular retailer, I looked at two categories. One was tomato ketchup, and the other one was oral care. In the oral care, there were 14 different ways of spelling the word toothbrush. So how can I do even just a Boolean search for toothbrush and hope that it will bring out all of the toothbrushes?
Yeah.
Just to make sure they're in the right subcategory.
Yeah. We call it our equivalency model. So understanding that this equals that. And we ask the shopper, like, if we make a swap, we're working on giving them the ability to be like, this is a good swap, this is not a good swap, and every time that they give us that feedback, our model gets better, right?
Yeah.
And so just continuing to and I think that's been a really big lesson for us with Stretch, that is different than what I've seen in the past, is we kind of from day one have said, hey, we're building this, but we need your help. And the feedback that we've gotten so much feedback. I mean, it's just been really generous feedback. Almost every shopper that has taken the time to send us feedback, the feedback is structured something like this: Dear Stretch, thank you for building this, but here's how you can be better, right? Like, the internet is mean usually. Like, the internet is not usually a kind place, but we've been really, really grateful, for how many shoppers who have taken the time to say, hey, I see what you're building. And if you get it right, like, this changes everything. Here's how you can make it better for me, for my family, and for the way that we shop. And and some of it's geographical, some of it's retailer, some of it's products that they want. But super grateful to have that feedback loop with a community of shoppers already, even 3 months after launch.
It's something that I've adopted for the last 30 or 40 years in retail now. I've got the grey hair, I've got the bruises, but I still have all my fingers, which is good. It's amazing how many retailers still do not speak directly to their customer, because their customer is always willing to give you feedback. And when we actually started up the Happy Me customer engagement app, we actually advertised, or we asked customers to come onto the panel, to be the ambassador group, to advise us. There's an advisory panel, because the app was for them. And I remember doing the very first presentation, and there were 25 customers who'd come, and we gave them coffee and croissants and this and the other. And I went through the presentation. It was almost like a corporate presentation, but it wasn't. It was a nice presentation. And at the end, they all clapped. And I was so shocked that the customers were clapping what we were doing. And I said to him, okay, thank you very much, but this is amazing. This is we've never seen anything like this before. Can you do this? So one of the customers said to us about the group. And they said, okay, if I have myself, my wife, my child, and my maid, I still have to give money to the maid to go and buy the items. And we said, well, what we can do maybe is, and the idea just came out of that conversation, was we can maybe build a wallet inside the app where you can either have cards or you can have cash. Oh, how can that be secure? Well, they can only use the cash in our store. They can't use the cash anywhere else. It's not a banking app, but it's banking secure. But you can put 200 dirhams into this app, and then the maid can only shop in your store to buy it. So you can't use it anywhere else.
Nice.
And that came from a customer. So, they're great. Customers are amazing.
Yeah. And I think it's funny. With the last year, I this was not on my bingo card for 2025, but I kept going viral on TikTok, talking about what we were building. Like, I'm not a TikToker, right? Like, look at me. Like, I'm not a TikToker, but I saw that there were savings influencers and frugal influencers. And so I just said, hey, groceries are expensive. I'm trying to use technology to help families save money, save time, save stress. This is what I'm thinking about building. And the first time that I showed a picture of the app, it got 1,000 comments, not
Wow.
views, not likes, comments. 1,000
Wow.
comments of people saying, build it. Like, please, whatever it takes, like, I'll pay for that. And I was like, no, it's a free app. They're like, let me know when it's available for download. And so,
Wow.
just the encouragement from the shoppers, and say, I asked them, I said, how do you build your shopping list currently? Like, what are the have tos? What is, and just kind of double checked against our product roadmap and said, this is what shoppers are really looking for and this is what they want. And we obviously have our own point of view on how we're building this and where we're going, but getting all that feedback and just understanding, not just what they want to see, but also just understanding how the problem affects them, right? Just continuing to help the understanding of the problem we're truly solving. And that then informs the solution that we're truly building.
Absolutely. I mean, I will admit to being jealous about your 1,000 comments, because my average TikTok watch time is 0.9 seconds at the moment, which apparently is still quite good. But that's for music.
It's just a volume game. It's just, how many can you post?
Yeah.
But I will say TikTok's algorithm is probably the best. That once it finds your people, it finds your people.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've seen other stuff that other people have done, and it's just shot through the roof. But anyway, TikTok is not my major platform. So I can't do any dancing. I think that's part of the problem.
There you
go. Okay, well, one final question before we get to the 3 simple things. How do you see platforms like Stretch collaborating with retailers rather than competing? And what's the benefit for both sides? What does the retailer get out of it?
Yeah, I think the retailers that have approached us already, and I'm super grateful, to have already had, C-suite executives and heads of loyalty programs, in conversations with us. They want to make sure that their prices are accurately represented. Mm-hmm. And that their loyalty and coupons are actually accurately represented, because they know that when, if they're an everyday low price or they're a high low, right, different strategies for different folks are going to show up differently in just a side-by-side comparison. And so understanding what their strategy is and how they want their products and prices to appear in the app, I think is the first step, because what we're seeing and what we believe is that shoppers are making their decisions before they get to the store. They're making their decisions before they get to your .com. They're making their decisions before they get to your app, right? So the retailer's ability to influence those decisions is becoming less and less and less, right? Those decisions are being made further and further upstream in the consideration cycle. So they're being made on a shopping list, like Stretch. They're being made on a recipe site. They're being made inside of ChatGPT. And so being able to see what decisions are being made further upstream is something that retailers are pretty excited about. And then to understand what did they actually buy downstream and close that loop. And so we're working on, we actually filed a couple of patents on some technology that will help us with the closing of the loop. That's retailer agnostic. So excited about that. But I think that's the, kind of the aligning of incentives, but it's coming from executives who understand that there's a bunch of waves about to crash on the shore at the same time for retailers, and that they have to do something different. For anybody who's saying, no, we can strong arm our way through this change and keep everything the same, it's going to be a rough couple of years. But for those who say, hey, shoppers are expecting more, shoppers are used to having access to this information for every other purchase that they make. Right? Every other purchase we make, we have a source of truth that I want to buy this. Who will sell it to me? Well, I will, and I will. Okay, great. I'm going to pick you because you're the closest, or I'm going to pick you because you're giving me the best price. For grocery, that doesn't exist, and shoppers are expecting that now. They're expecting that information. And whoever chooses to participate is going to have the alpha in the early days, right? If you're there first, if you're participating If you're willing to say, hey, we might not have the best price, but we're the best location, we've got the best loyalty, we've got other things that we can compete on. It's not just price. For some people, it's always going to be price, but they already have their systems in place to get the price. They'll drive to 4 or 5 stores. But for the busy person who doesn't have extra time or extra money, they're going to look for something like Stretch, and we're excited to be that solution for them.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, so we usually end the session with a Retail 101 online tradition, which is breaking things down into 3 simple things. Because I've always said, a store is basically the back where we take the goods in, the floor itself, and then the checkouts and the entrance. And then each one of those areas only has 3 jobs. So at the back door, we take stuff off a lorry, we check it's for us, and we put it in the warehouse. On the store floor, we put goods on a clean shelf with a price ticket. And then at the checkouts, we say hello, scan the goods, and take the money. So a store itself is 3 blocks of 3 jobs, 9 jobs in total. But what I always try and do is break things down into 3 simple things. So what would be the 3 simple things that you would want the listeners today to remember about today's session?
Oh, man. Today's session is fall in love with the problem, not the solution. That you have a 1,000% success rating on making it through the hardest day of your life. And that things are going to change. And the best thing you can do is change along with them as fast as possible.
Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, the change thing, I mean, we always talk about, the only thing that's constant is change. But it's also how much change you drive yourself as well, yeah?
Absolutely. It's there is no growth in the comfort zone, and there is no comfort in the growth zone.
Yes. I mean, having been through controlled startups for somebody else before, I've done 5 startups now, but that's luckily been with somebody else's money, not my own. And the problem that we were solving was relatively simple compared to the things that you've been looking at. One of those was, okay, we want to set up this business to make money, which they did. So that was good. But yeah, actually having the idea yourself of okay, this is the problem. Now I can find a solution to it. And like say your 10-year perspective, this is going to take you 10 years to solve it is amazing, considering also at the time how many things can change also in that 10 years. And you've experienced that yourself with unfortunately the loss of an investor, a pandemic hitting in the middle of that. These are things that you just can't budget for at all and can't plan for. So
yeah. No, I think that no matter how high the highs or how low the lows, you are everybody listening already has what it takes to get through both.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something that I firmly believe in. And I've lived it on both ends of the spectrum. And I think that the strongest people I know, just continue to lean into that self-reliance and saying that I've got what it takes, and if I don't have it immediately in my possession, I know how to go get it. And I think that's in a world where things will become easier and easier because of technology and AI, there's going to be a bifurcation of people who lean in to building what comes next, and people who kind of check out and say, this is okay, this is good, this is enough for me, and I don't know that either is wrong, but I think it's important to know which one you are.
Absolutely. And we can go through history and look at that, because when the motor car first came in, when the first computer came in, what was the famous saying about IBM thinking there's only a market for about 10 of these worldwide? We all look at things differently, and some people do end up being left behind, unfortunately. Okay, that's fantastic. Andy, thank you so much for joining us today. Everyone, that was Andy Ellwood, a fantastic look at where AI, human behaviour, resilience and grocery retail are headed next. It's now time to say goodbye from Andy. Goodbye, Andy.
See you, Mark.
And of course, goodbye from me. We'll be back soon with another Retail Voices episode. Check out retail101online.com for more details on upcoming guests. And don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell wherever you get your podcast fix. Welcome to the Retail Education Revolution. Thanks, Andy. That was excellent.
Awesome.